How's it going? Welcome to this new episode of The Alex Show. As you can see, I have a guest, and I have the great pleasure and honor of having Germán Rodríguez Mayor here with us, all the way from Argentina. How are you, Germán?
Hi, Alex. To you and to all the audience, it's a great pleasure for me to be invited to share your space. And, well, I hope I can contribute as much as possible with my experiences, knowledge, and abilities. I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation, Germán. And, well, let me tell you a bit about Germán. He's a therapist, author, and artist, as you also mentioned to me.
Yes, self-taught.
Self-taught, right? They're the best ones. The best artists are the ones who don't. Everything was organic, everything was intuitive, everything was true wisdom, as I call it, because it's organic like nature, right? Nature didn't have to study at a university. So, Germán, we're talking about a very interesting topic. This is a topic that I've discussed with guests and personally in my segments, which is dealing with trauma, about moving away from this position where we are always victims, where things are always done to us, where we are always traumatized. And for me, I would encourage everyone to please work on releasing trauma, to leave trauma behind. And so, well, there are specific techniques, therapies, and everything that you use that you have experience with. I would really appreciate it if you could tell us about these therapies like regression or therapies such as biodecoding. Thank you very much.
All right. With pleasure, Alex. I believe it's very important for people to know at least a little or even a lot, but at the very least to have some idea of what you're talking about, because when you understand a bit about what trauma is, how we are programmed, how long we've been carrying it, and how we can start to dissolve it, soften it, understand it, and manage it, well, we stop being trapped in that mold or limitation or prison that emotionally and also with words, with programs, let's say, with code and sources, and with energy and code, let's say, with masculine and feminine energy. The emotions and thoughts would be like masculine and feminine energy, ourselves, which program our behaviors and habits. So by being able to understand trauma, sometimes it resolves itself, sometimes it takes work or more or less time. And other times it's very difficult to resolve, and you have to learn to live with it without getting angry, without punishing yourself, without putting yourself down just because there's something that's very hard for me to overcome, because it's very relative to the evolution of the individual, of the psyche, of the soul. For those of us who believe that the soul doesn't have just one life, as in my case, the soul needs several lives, let's say. Life is the same, the life of the soul, but the biological life of the body, we need to take on body several times to be born, to die, to be born, to die. Death doesn't exist. I mean, the body does, but not the soul, because that's the only way the soul can eventually become wise, happy, free, powerful. Well, everything that we understand we can achieve, right? As was once said, I believe in Christ. There are those who don't, and that's respectable. He said things like the ones I'm about to mention. According to what theologians say, he said, it's written, though we have to see if it's true. But anyway, I believe that seeing how life evolves, he used to say things like, the things I do, you will do as well. And even greater things, you are God's, but you have forgotten it. Seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, so with that information, it really seems to me that we have a kind of roadmap to work with our emotions, our traumas, and our pains, and to genuinely seek the underlying truth within them. A psychic trap that we sometimes have simply due to the natural course of our lives, how we are born and so on, and other times because there are energies, beings, entities, or energetic levels that put obstacles or traumas in our way. If we don't see them, it's also difficult to overcome them. It's both things. Everything can be resolved, but it starts with seeing it, detecting it, understanding it. And well, for that, there are various tools. I use video decoding, as you mentioned, regressions, emotional education, which is like a toolkit to learn how to turn those traumas to your advantage, manage them or overcome them, dissolve them, as I said. And well, there are many more therapies. All therapies in general work. You have to look at the type of trauma, the type of personality, the moment you're in, and that's it. Thank you. A single therapy can be applied to all types of work, or by combining several, one can resolve a trauma. I'm speaking a bit generally, but among what is known or officially accepted academically, we have many therapies. Then there are others that are not recognized as academic or official, but that work very well, resolving traumas even better or faster than some academic methodologies. And well, they are not recognized at the moment either because they haven't been researched, or because there's an interest in not recognizing them, or one of those two possibilities.
Very well. Take care, because in a much simpler way than how you handle it, honestly, what I suggest, there's a situation with trauma, Germán, that often when I talk to people, I invite them to forget, for example. Because we talk about forgiveness, but for me, forgetting is more important. And sometimes people tell me, I just can't forget it. I can't forgive because it's not fair, because I was hurt. I'm talking here about traumas, for example, when it's a partner or a friend, a coworker, a family member who does something. And what I tell them is, when you carry that trauma, if you don't transform that trauma and you do nothing, which is the power of forgetting, in essence, you're giving power to that trauma. And at a certain point, you're giving power to the person who hurt you. If you offer not so much forgiveness, but rather forgetfulness. In other words, because a very important situation is, for example, a toxic partner, a partner who abuses you, a partner who treats you badly. Well, no one expects you to stay there, but you can say, look, thank you. This is as far as we go. You go your way and I'll go mine. And not carry that with you on your path in that crossroads, not take that burden with you. Truly, genuinely forget about it. I know it's very, very difficult, and I know that what you're talking about is much deeper, because you speak, first of all, I completely resonate with you in thinking that we live many lives. I'm not sure if you see it this way too, that we don't just live in this system, but we also live in other systems as well. And that trauma keeps accumulating. And this is where, if you like, I can introduce the topic of biodecoding, because as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that trauma eventually manifests as physical conditions. If you'd like, I can share a personal case of mine. All my life, this experience.
If you'll allow me, let's continue with what you want to tell me now about your experience, but so I don't forget something you mentioned, which we'll connect later, because sometimes among other topics, I forget things in the rush to answer everything, and then I realize I missed clarifying something. Of course, I understand what you're saying about forgetting. From one perspective, it would be correct, but let me see how I can put it. I understand that what you want to point out is that one shouldn't be resentful and constantly hold on to that anger, that resentment, that hatred, that guilt, and keep putting all the blame on the other person, thinking the other person is causing the problem, because if we do that, we'll never get out of it. So that resentment does need to be worked on, to be understood, because behind it there is pain, a deep pain, and when you can process, understand, and work through your own pain, then you can reach a kind of emotional peace. You're no longer at war with that person or that situation. But I don't have to forget, in the sense that this should give me experience and learning for the next time I might find myself in a similar situation. For example, a toxic relationship, as you mentioned, which is something that generally happens to all of us. A father, a brother, a friend, a partner, a child, always a boss, a coworker. We always have some kind of relationship, a connection with someone who is psychopathic, narcissistic, manipulative, an energy parasite, etc. So if you enter into a relationship like this and you don't know, generally, until we gain a certain level of clarity, we open up and give ourselves because we believe the other person will take care of us, since we try to take care of others, right? We treat people well, with respect. We might make mistakes, but we are not permanently harmful by nature. But a psychopath or narcissist is. So we believe they won't hurt us, especially a psychopath or a human being with an attached entity that functions similarly, what are called possessions. They are similar. They are designed to absorb energy because they cannot live on their own. So if you are able to get out of a relationship like that, which is very difficult, you shouldn't forget it in the sense of, oh, I learned my lesson. Now I know the signs. I'll be alert in case I ever encounter another relationship like that in a different area of life. But yes, that's what I'm saying, that you shouldn't forget. It's like saying, well, I learned the lesson. Now I know math 1, but I shouldn't hold on to the resentment, to that situation of learning math, or to that individual with whom I had to go through that situation. Traumatic, right? In that, yes, I agree with you. I just wanted to clarify that other point, which is necessary so that we can move on and manage the trauma and not stumble over the same stone again in the future.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I explained it poorly. I was talking about harmonizing or dissolving, and I'll give you an example. About 2 months ago, I watched a video by a content creator on YouTube from here in Mexico, and he had a guest who was talking about his mother, and I didn't watch the whole thing. I stopped because I felt there was no point in continuing to watch it. I had already understood the point. But let's say that during the half hour I watched, the young woman just kept insulting her mother, saying that her whole life was a mess because of her mother. And they also clarified that she no longer had a relationship with her mother, which I actually see as a positive thing. That's what I want to make clear. I mean, if you end up with a mother like that, toxic, you should just go your own way and let your mother be as she is. When I talk about forgetting, listening to you, it totally resonated with me because that's exactly it. Don't forget it, but when the memory comes up, why do you have to talk about your mother like that? And I'm not saying it's because she's your mother or anything, but why do you hold on to that resentment? Why don't you let it go?
Of course, that's right.
That's it. Remember it and learn that, for example, if you had a toxic mother, well, maybe you'll end up with a toxic partner too. And when you recognize the patterns before, how do you say it? Sooner rather than later. I mean, better at the beginning. You know what? Thank you very much. I'm not interested in this relationship. I wish you the best. You go your way and I'll go mine. Don't look for me anymore. I won't answer you anymore. I'm going to block your number, etc. That's what I mean. Not so much that your memory becomes amnesiac, but that when the memory comes back, it causes the least amount of disturbance, the least amount of disharmony.
Of course, exactly. What happens is that, let's say this is how our psyche works. It's not that someone is doing it wrong. This is just how we function. Are we all doing it wrong or are we all doing it right? This is how we function. Like in this case, where the girl gives the example that she distanced herself from her mother, but she still sees her mother as the perpetrator and herself as the victim. It's because she hasn't been able to resolve, hasn't been able to transcend, understand, and work through her trauma. That's why she keeps stumbling over the same stone and remains stuck in that struggle, unable to get out of it because she doesn't understand it. Once you understand it, thank you. Only then can you begin to let go of that resentment or gradually dissolve, fade, or even quickly eliminate that resentment you feel, for example, toward a mother. Because if you don't do that work of becoming aware, of understanding that I have the power to heal myself, to forgive myself for not being able to defend myself, to forgive the other person because maybe they were sick, maybe a psychopath, for example, or had their own issues, well, those are their problems. What I do is distance myself, support myself, take care of myself, nurture myself as if I were an adult caring for a child, a father to a child, the masculine side toward the child, the logical side toward the emotional. That's the duality we have to learn to integrate within ourselves. With logic, I provide words, resources, strategies, tools to my emotional side, which is my inner child who understands nothing but feels everything. That's how a child is. They don't understand anything, but they feel everything. So all those things from childhood that affect us deeply, our mother, father, school, whatever it may be, if as adults we don't understand that we have the power to see that it was a learning experience and not, although there may have been bad intentions, but what I mean is if you keep not seeing it as something you can learn from and free yourself from, then yes, in that sense, as you said, let go, move on to another chapter and say, well, that person, that relationship was toxic. I'm ending it. I'm closing that door. And I forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for not being able to defend myself, for how much the abandonment, the betrayal, etc. hurt me. Now I'm going to be alert so I don't fall again for someone who might show up with those same traits, because that's definitely going to happen. Someone similar will show up. And that's when we see whether we've managed to overcome the trauma or not, right? I start to notice the characteristics and I say, thanks, but no, I'm going in a different direction, just like you said. If we haven't overcome it because we haven't fully processed, understood, and transcended it within ourselves, we'll end up in another relationship like that, and it will be very hard to get out. Or maybe it'll be a little easier because we'll notice it sooner and maybe get out more quickly. But what you're saying is correct. I just wanted to add that if someone keeps, if I'm still angry at the person who hurt me, it means I haven't yet transcended it within myself, because the work is always personal. Either I distance myself or I defend myself, and defense can take many forms depending on the situation. I don't want to get off track, but basically with yes, we give permission, which is generally the feminine energy, the mother nurturing the circle, and with no, we set boundaries, which is the masculine energy, the father structure, from here to here, this yes, this no. So those two energies, masculine and feminine, father and mother, adult and child, logic and emotion or intuition, sensitivity, we need to integrate those two energies within ourselves so that we become integrated and balanced adults, able to make decisions, but always filtering them through our feeling. And when a feeling arises, for example, anger, rage, hatred, or fury, being able to process it through logic in order to control and manage it so we don't react impulsively. That's a task that can take us maybe a whole lifetime or quite a long time, right? It depends on the relationships. It depends on the situations. That's why I say that not all of us are at the same level of evolution. There are people who handle this easily and quickly, and there are others for whom it takes a whole lifetime or a long time, right? And that has to do with the fact that not all souls have the same, I don't know whether to call it maturation time, or maybe we just haven't made the most of each incarnation, right? Just to give you an example, maybe we're repeating the same lesson 5 or 10 times instead of having taken advantage of it and passed it in 1 or 2 tries and then moved on to another, right? Because we're always learning and always moving on to more complex or deeper things in terms of individual responsibility, right? I don't know if I made a mess of things, but I hope what I'm saying makes sense.
Yes, I think it was pretty clear. And look, the only thing I wanted to add was I've had it happen when I talk to people like that because my position seems a bit strange to them, that I invite them to harmonize their trauma. And they seek justice, they say, but it's not fair. I mean, I can't forget this. I can't forgive this person. I can't let go of this trauma, this hatred, this resentment I feel toward this person because it's not fair. And that's when I tell them, well, what is fair and what isn't fair in this life? If there are people dying of hunger, is that fair in any way? Of course not. So I'm not going to mention the person's name. She was a guest on this channel and she mentioned it publicly. That's why I can talk about it. It wasn't something she told me in private, that she had suffered abuse within her family. I don't remember exactly, but it was a very close family abuse. And this family member had recently been in jail, by the way, and had just been released. And so I saw her, but the way she described it with such resentment, Germán, but with a resentment she just couldn't let go of. But don't you see that you're hurting yourself? It's just that he's still there and I don't know. I mean, that resentment is hurting you. And then we know that these kinds of situations can trigger serious physical disorders, including illness. It starts with C, which the platform doesn't like, so we're not going to say it. But that illness, because it's an internal toxicity that the body somehow has to process. And it processes it through that illness. A lot of things can cause that illness, not just emotional toxicity, but it is a kind of toxicity because you can see the rage. It was as if she had him right in front of her, as if she wanted him there. And so I said to her,
exactly, she does have him inside her. Just like you said, it seems like she has him in front of her, but in reality, she has him inside. Their memories, their energy. A bundle of energy is an entity, even if it's just a tiny speck of information, but she has it inside her. That's why the person changes, as you rightly say. It's not fair at all. The thing is, whoever is accompanying that person, a therapist, a partner, someone, needs to have the sensitivity to know when to be gentle, calm, to provide comfort, a word of encouragement, and when to set a boundary like, okay, look, up to here, it's best for you to get out of there or do this, because to keep staying in that car, self-flagellation isn't going to solve it. So there isn't a single or linear way, but you have to be there to support them so that those people can see and understand it. You see it and it's crystal clear. But what happens is that for someone who hasn't resolved an abuse and releases the abuser, it will create that feeling of being in an inferior position in a lower place. Thank you. Because it will generate anger, rejection, helplessness, and so on, right? Which is understandable. That's why it's a delicate matter. And you have to support them so they can resolve it within themselves. Obviously, it's not fair, but if they don't resolve it, it can trigger, as you rightly say, and here we're already getting into biodecoding, a cellular mutation that the body itself produces, the biological body, responding to the unconscious. The unconscious, as discovered by Reichhammer, at least in what relates to biodecoding and the new Germanic medicine. He was a very prominent German oncologist in his time. Honestly, I don't know if he's still alive or has passed away because I haven't really kept up with They took away his medical license. He was imprisoned and he had to leave Germany. If you want, we can go into more detail later, but just so I don't stray too far from the topic.
just one question. He was the one whose son died, right?
Exactly.
Tragically, his son passed away, and then just about a year later, he himself developed a debilitating illness.
Exactly.
It starts with a C.
That's exactly what he said. That is to say, for example, when cells mutate and start living completely without oxygen, they then become anaerobic, turn highly acidic, and start to gangrene. After that, they consume, ingest, and disrupt all the surrounding healthy tissue and the other nearby cells, which is the thing you mentioned that YouTube often censors. It has the name of a particular zodiac sign, I think the one from the month of July, that is due to a mutation in the organism, because what our psyche does is, if I with my conscious mind don't resolve the stress I have, the emotional stress in the face of a predator, an abuser, something that causes me a lot of stress, that consumes a lot of my vital energy. And if I don't resolve it within a reasonable time, the psyche, the unconscious, will try to resolve it by triggering a biological mutation to try to make that problem disappear. From this perspective, what is known by the name of that disease, which is understood and is systematized and well explained by this oncologist, Reichheimer, is a biological solution like a survival program in response to a psycho-emotional situation that the individual cannot consciously resolve. So traditional medicine sees it as something negative. Obviously, if it isn't reversed, it is negative because the person could die, could lose all their vital energy and not continue living in this life. But if you see, for example, that a tissue mutates because of this, I have to look at when it started, what I was experiencing, where in my life I was going through something very traumatic, in which area of my life, or at what specific moment, or with what news, or with which person, or in what setting my life suddenly changed, or when it was something very gradual, progressive, but sustained over a long period of time, like, for example, a relationship, very toxic that I can't get out of, a boss, a partner, right? That leads to cellular mutations because the unconscious produces them in an attempt to solve the problem that I am not consciously ending or managing. That, very, very briefly, would be the work of biodecoding, right? We have the trauma, and based on what this oncologist developed, let's say through mappings where he links trauma, tissue, emotion, and creates a map he detects little blisters that form in the brain and observes what type of tissue it is, what function it serves, whether it's skeletal muscle, nervous tissue, and all of that is related to the type of trauma. And that's where biodecoding comes into address and work on it. That is starting from the biological aspect, or it could also be emotional, let's say a very intense anguish or a situation in the stomach I would already see. Specifically using the example of the stomach, I could say that it would be related to something the individual cannot emotionally digest. I can't swallow this, I can't stomach this, this news really upset me, and if that's intense or prolonged over time, it can cause a mild or significant disturbance in the stomach, like acidity or something else, because emotionally it's something I can't digest. Then there are other variables like the intestine or another part of the digestive system, depending on more specific qualities of the situation or secondary emotions that come with the stronger emotion of not being able to digest something. So that's where decoding from a biological perspective comes in, relating it to the emotional experience of the person, the individual, and from there, suggestions are made about what to do to change that situation within oneself, because maybe the other person doesn't experience it, is in jail, we broke up, I don't know. But if I don't resolve it within myself, if I don't transform it, if I don't process it within myself, I will never resolve the trauma, no matter how much I try to forget it. I'll just be covering it up and creating amnesia, either forced or automatic, because sometimes children or teenagers experience, or we experience, very intense things. And in order to keep living a so-called normal life, amnesia occurs. I don't remember. Nothing happened here. I go on with my normal life. But that doesn't mean the trauma is resolved by that amnesia. It remains encapsulated in a moment. In a similar situation in the future, if the person experiences an emotion, a word, or a similar situation, that trauma resurfaces and is reactivated. That's why sometimes there are personalities that are guilt-ridden, reactive, or violent, because they are systematically lighting the fuse with the same match, with the same fuel. I stumble over the same stone and react the same way with my partner as I did with my mom, my dad, or my child. Because that's what I learned from my dad, my mom, my grandfather, my family, or whoever it was.
Yes, and I also wanted to take a moment to mention what that name is actually referring to, which I believe is German New Medicine. I also found it very interesting when I was researching this topic a few years ago, this concept that if we resolve a conflict, specifically I think a territorial one, for example, a work-related problem, an issue like fraud, a money problem, something like that, they call those territorial conflicts. Someone steals something from you, takes something away from you, and it's resolved very quickly. It can happen that you experience what seems like bradycardia, which is kind of like, just as there's tachycardia, here your heart rate drops significantly, a sort of relaxation. And after 21 days, I don't know if you've heard about this, a heart attack can occur. So they suggested that when you process conflicts, for example, being dispossessed of property or being robbed, The case they told me about was someone who had a hypertoxic relationship with, this was in politics, with the mayor of a city. This person worked for him and just couldn't take it anymore, couldn't go on. And then this person announces that he won't be running for re-election. Well, that very day it started for him. This conflict was resolved way too quickly. 21 days later, he had a heart attack and it was fatal.
Of course. As far as I know, because new research can always come out and I might not be aware of it, but as far as I know, when I studied, when I trained, and I insist up to the latest update I have, this would be the only modification in survival that the psyche makes in the body, that if it isn't controlled properly in that brief period, the person could die because it's different from other types of trauma. It gives you more room for emotional correction, to change habits, words, the way I treat myself. And the problem, what we call illness, the survival program, will gradually deactivate and fade away. Now, the case, as you rightly say, is when people are very territorial or very possessive about what gives them security, a business, a job, money, a partner, something like that. If I feel like I'm about to lose that or that I could lose it, that usually causes I'm a territorial person, because then there are other types of situations. For example, I can't mark my territory. People invade me, they dominate me, they walk all over me, they treat me badly. I can't say no. And always, well, that can lead to a urinary infection, which unconsciously is related to urine. Biologically, animals mark their territory. Animals mark their territory to indicate that it is theirs and to prevent others from invading it. It always depends a lot on how the individual experiences it. For one person, a situation might lead them more toward a certain emotional response and generate a possible adaptation, a possible illness, what is called an illness, but from this perspective, it wouldn't really be considered one. Or if someone experiences it with a different emotional response, another person might channel it in another way. But what you're pointing out is those individuals who are very possessive and place a lot of importance on something they have. For example, the company, prestige, money, as this example clearly illustrates, and they feel threatened by the possibility of losing it. They constantly have to fight very hard not to lose it, with a lot of strength, determination, drive, and, well, it's like a duel between males, as I've explained very briefly and crudely, if you will. Mutations occur in the body, in the arteries, so that more blood can circulate as much as needed to be able to fight with more strength, or to be on the defensive with more power, in order not to lose what I care about most, the female. Work, and when that gets resolved suddenly, for example, you get your job back, your wife comes back, and you are desperate not to lose her. That's not a gradual resolution, but rather something that happens all at once. And in that sudden moment, it can cause a rupture in the tissues of the heart, leading to what is known as a heart attack, a cardiac problem that can result in death. As far as I know, and I insist there may be some serious updates, the only thing that biologically can't be, let's say you have to be very careful in a short period of time, because death can happen quickly. With another situation like the one you mentioned, the illness associated with the zodiac sign, you have a lot of leeway to work on resolving it. It's not immediate, as you pointed out. Yes, it could be, right? The moment of stress, because from the time someone starts to feel stressed about losing their business, their job, their partner, their reputation, their money, that can last a month, 2 months, 3 months, a week. But if the person is very possessive, very territorial, like, this is mine, it's mine, it's mine, I don't want to let it go. If I lose it, I lose my reputation, I lose my life, I lose everything. And then suddenly they get it back. They could have an attack and die, a heart attack. And just like that.
Another example they gave me was, for instance, winning the lottery. If you were, as you said, very focused, very territorial about money, and you weren't having money problems, and money that we all agree is necessary, but the focus is what becomes the goal, what becomes the whole interest, everything that drives you. Like you said, we're talking about very territorial people, as you mentioned, where the focus is just too much. And it's so much, as you said, you explained it very well biologically, but it's so much emotion to process in such a short time. That's why being relaxed and trying to process things that way was explained to me. A therapist also explained it to me, and he gave me several situations. He was also a fan of German new medicine, and he also does regressions and everything here in Mexico. And he told me about that case. In fact, he told me about the case of the politician. It had just come out in the newspaper that while exercising on a mountain, he had collapsed. He told me, I know this person, I have treated this person, Do you know what happened 3 weeks ago before the mayor said, I'm not going to run for re-election? And this person goes from maximum stress to minimum stress, entering a state of relaxation upon relaxation.
There is
that it has to be done gradually.
Exactly. It's due to a lack of learning how to manage emotions, which we are never taught, and it's a necessary task that needs to be incorporated into education. For now, each person is doing it in their own private sphere. At some point, it will have to become part of education, but as you say, it's like receiving a long-awaited gift all at once, like winning the lottery, getting your wife back, landing the job you've always dreamed of, and being very competitive, very territorial, and very afraid of losing it. And if you lose it, you lose the meaning of your life. So when you suddenly get it, cardiac arrest, and that's it. That is, I insist, as far as I know, the only biological mutation in our body that can lead to death. Everything else is more gradual, more progressive. It gives you more time to detect it, to manage it, to correct it, and to return to normal. It's called normotonia, normality, because we have cycles of vital energy consumption and cycles of vital energy recovery, which would be during the day and then rest at night, during the day and while resting at night. That would be normal. It's like a range where no diseases are generated, even though we are active and passive and we consume and recover. But when stress shoots up higher, because a lion appears in front of me, I either freeze, run away, or fight, but the stress will spike. The consumption of vital energy will be a very high peak. So when that consumption of vital energy becomes very high and then suddenly drops, if it is a sharp, pronounced peak and then it drops, it is going to drop quite a lot until it eventually returns to a normal balanced cycle. In that sudden drop, that is what is called the resolution of the conflict, the crisis. Once that's resolved, because the lion is gone and I relax, I might pee myself, poop myself, feel short of breath, lose strength, collapse to the floor, lose my memory, start trembling. That's when the symptoms appear. Before, when I'm at peak stress, I don't have symptoms. I don't feel hungry. My focus is entirely on the lion, like tunnel vision, as they say. Everything gets focused on the problem. The same thing happens to us when we have other problems. We're constantly thinking about work. The lion leaves and we relax. That's what's called an ISIS conflict. When the conflict that causes stress goes away, we relax, and then the symptoms appear: pain, fatigue, sleepiness. And with those symptoms, since we think we're sick, we go to the doctor, they say, let's run some tests, you have this or that, you're sick. And that would be within traditional medicine, but with medicine from this perspective, we say, oh, well, the trauma was this, now you're recovering. That's where it is. It's in the parasympathetic process, the recovery of energy, where all the symptoms appear, and you need to support yourself by managing emotions, resting, maybe fasting, maybe changing your diet, distancing yourself from the relationships or the lion that was draining your energy. So then after some time, a day, a week, a month, we return to normotonia, which would be a normal level of stress consumption and normal rest. A normal level of stress consumption, in other words, a normal life. That in a nutshell would be the analysis of stress that gets triggered and consumes our energy, and the recovery that comes as the counterpart to that escalation of stress, the escalation of energy consumption to repair tissues. Inflammation allows those tissues to regenerate. It always depends on the tissue, but these wouldn't be considered diseases, rather repair solutions, survival mechanisms, corrections to what came before. So one has to look at what happened before in order to learn to attach a different kind of emotion to it, so that I can fully heal and no longer be afraid of the lion or a conflictive relationship, because I'll be able to sense it from afar and either distance myself or find a tool to handle it.
That's right, what you mentioned, which I think is known. I'm not sure if it's the same in Spanish, but in English it's fight or flight. I don't know, that state of fight or flight. I'm not sure if that's correct in Spanish. Exactly. It's a natural state that our biology, our physical body provides us. Exactly. Literally, it's to escape from the lion, escape from the bear, escape from whatever it is, from danger, right? And it's either fight or escape, two options. If it's a bear, you have to run. If it's a lion, too. Of course, in those cases, biologically, we usually have three options. One is to escape, as you said. That would be flight, to fight, to defend yourself, or freeze, which is when you just freeze in fear so they don't see you, or you think they're going to eat me, so I'll try not to feel anything. You just freeze from, there are three possibilities. But anyway. Yes, what I wanted to mention, you explained it very well. I feel that modern life, especially in urban cities and all that, I lived in a very big city in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. The last data I heard, it had 6 million inhabitants across several connected municipalities. Traffic, it takes 2 hours to cross the city with traffic, people going to work. I'm lucky enough to have my own business very close to my house. I'm extremely fortunate, but there are many people who have to drive an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half back in the evening, 8 hours of work stress or 10 hours of work stress, and then they get home and face problems at home, the kids, school, the wife, money, the bills. And it's understandable that they're constantly in a triple state of alertness, of flight, of fight, of just being. And that's why sometimes there are people, I'm sure we all know them, who react in that way, and that's when you realize that you're in that state. And for me, something that has personally helped me a lot, much more than meditation, is contemplation, breathing, focusing on the simplest thing in life, which is to breathe. And that's why I invite, there are many people. Yes, go ahead. Do you want to say something?
No, of course. I was just confirming what you said. That's right. What happens is that just as we have different personalities, different ways of facing situations or resolving a conflict, the same goes for the techniques that will help us achieve that calm or self-observation. Some people, like in your case, find breathing to be spectacular, whether it's staying still or not, walking, jogging, or just being still, having a mate, a coffee, or nothing at all, just breathing and meditating. There are people for whom that's very easy and others for whom it's not. When they stay still, their minds become very active, but it's all a process and a learning experience. You have to look for the tool that's easiest or most familiar for you to use in order to achieve that goal, which is to calm yourself, to slow down your thoughts. Because when everything is moving too fast with a high frequency, lots of rapid thoughts and little time, it's impossible to feel calm. So you have to work on making your thoughts slow down. That's precisely when a mental space opens up. A space for your intuition, for deeper reflection, and for profound realization. It's for seeing something important that you hadn't been able to see before, and it all comes from being significantly calmer. And simply focusing on your breathing helps a great deal with that. Recently, I'm taking this a bit out of context, but it serves as an example. The important thing is that each person looks for the tool that suits them best. Some people need intense exercise like running or something similar, and then they calm their mind that way. Others need to calm down, meditate, and well, it all comes down to self-observation, seeing how I react to a certain situation and what I can do to choose a different reaction that benefits me. In other words, to consciously change my reaction. That's how it would be. But regarding breathing, I'll give a somewhat funny example, but it applies. I once heard a sexologist say that when a man wants to hold back or prevent ejaculation, which is challenging and difficult, he needs to stop breathing at that moment, right before reaching climax. If you're close to climax and about to ejaculate, you have to choose not to breathe for a few seconds or even half a minute. Without oxygen, ejaculation is prevented, and the rapid flow of thoughts and emotions is also stopped. It's as if time stands still, so to speak, and you start to slow down. So taking that example, which is a bit extreme, I mention it because, as you said, calming down, breathing, slowing down, the simple everyday things, looking at the scenery, listening to music, whatever it may be, praying. Some people find praying helpful, right? But the key is to bring in self-observation, because you can do a mantra and say, oh, perfect, I calm down. Now I have to apply self-observation to the situation that takes me out of my Om, because if the lion shows up again and my calm goes out the window, that's not enough. I have to learn how to handle the lion that makes me lose the calm I get from the Om, from relaxing, calming down, and meditating. But that's good as a preliminary step so that I can, let's say, breathe, meditate, or whatever it is to calm down. Once my thoughts have slowed down and I'm calm, then I can observe more broadly how I react when the lion appears and what I can do differently so that the lion doesn't paralyze me. Maybe I run away sooner or I fight it, but I don't keep reacting the same way every time.
That's right. Yes. Then you mentioned something very important, because I think there are different techniques. Personally, I don't agree with those who say you have to answer your thoughts, because essentially that's thoughts responding to thoughts, and it just creates an internal struggle, right? Then there's the Buddhist way, or the Zen state, which is, I really remember, if you see the Buddha, kill him. And what do they mean by that? That any thought that comes into your head has to be nullified and your mind has to be clear of thoughts. Personally, I align myself with those who say let them pass. That is, a thought comes, you're meditating, you're contemplating, you're self-observing, and thoughts are like birds. You just let them pass. You see them go by, but you don't pay attention to them. You don't respond to them. And little by little, by practicing this, I want to clarify, it takes weeks, months, years.
Okay,
you will start to achieve, I believe, meditative states, but without traditional meditation, which unfortunately, Germán has developed a complicated reputation. Because there are people who say that things like yoga, things like meditation, things like reciting mantras or prayers and all that work automatically. And I don't agree with that. Yes, all those things I just mentioned can open you up to regressive or devolved dark entities. I like to call them confused entities, entities that are looking for a symbiotic relationship, entities that offer you something. And that's where I say use discernment. If you're doing yoga and an entity like that appears, I think with your discernment, you'll immediately know that, just like with a bird, let it pass and it will leave you in peace. It will let you be. But I also feel that, just to finish, that I'd like to call these things tools because they're not even therapies. It's meditating. Anyone can meditate. I mean, they also open up a lot of possibilities and they've gotten a bad reputation because unfortunately there are also entities or confused ones, as I like to call them, that want to bother you. I mean, yes, I agree. Go ahead.
Yes, that's right. It is very much like you said. Maybe we could tweak it just a little bit in the following way, which is along the lines you are suggesting. When you are meditating or just consciously slowing down, breathing in any way that feels right, perhaps by a river, the sea, or a beautiful landscape, or meditating at home, focusing on your breath, and you are learning to notice what is going through your mind. Just like you said, it's like watching birds fly by or seeing thoughts pass by. That is great. And as a practice, it is very, very good. But if your practice is only that, it likely won't be enough. That is like the first essential part. And please remember, this is just my suggestion. I am not saying that this is the only way.
Perfect.
It works for me and for people, and in therapy too. From experience, it works. Once you see the birds, if you're aware that you're observing, that thoughts, memories, imaginings, fear of the future, fear of the past are passing by, you're observing and you're aware that you are the one observing, that's correct because you're training self-observation. But if you don't lose sight of the fact that you have to see what those thoughts provoke in you, because many times they'll be there, some thoughts might come up because you heard a noise and a thought popped into your head, or you smelled something and another thought came up, but they're always accompanied by a charge from the past. A color, a noise, a smell, a person, a look, a gesture will connect us with something from the past, with something from the countless files we have in our psyche. So when a thought passes by, like a bird, I look again and say, oh, look, a blackbird. How does that make me feel? What does a blackbird trigger in me? It doesn't relax me. For someone else, it might cause fear. For another, it might provoke anger. So that observation of what a thought triggers in me, without getting caught up in it, just letting thoughts flow, letting them pass. But still, how does a certain thought, a certain memory, a certain imagination about the future, a certain situation affect me? And based on what it triggers in me, for example, fear, that's where I can work on it. I can say, well, in the face of this fear that this thought caused, I'm going to breathe more deeply and look for a different alternative to handle this situation. I don't know, maybe I ask for help, read a book, sleep, work out, and get stronger, something that comes to mind. So when this blackbird appears again, which is now just a thought when I'm meditating, I'll have tools to dodge it, jump over it, make noise, scare it away, whatever it takes, and that will give me peace of mind. So those thoughts, which might be a memory from the past, depicted as an abuse that will show up with a different face. Maybe not necessarily the face of the person who committed the abuse or the person who experienced it, but perhaps appearing as a symbolic or archetypal image. That's why sometimes it's not so easy to just let it flow, and that's okay. But if one of those thoughts really disturbs you, try to look at it. Oh, look, the blackbird disturbed me. Now I'll see what meaning comes to me, what I sense. It could come through a dream, or I can start thinking about where the bird comes from, what it might be related to, but always in a meditative, observant way, not combative, not with anger, not wanting to kill the bird because the bird will come back. That's all I wanted to add, but yes. So when you're meditating with any technique or with a plant that opens your perception, a medicinal plant, you can also have entities attached to you or not. It always depends on your own capacity for self-observation and setting boundaries. You have to learn to manage your words, your emotions, your thoughts, but that comes from knowing yourself quite well. Otherwise, it's hard to perceive what belongs to you and what comes from something that has latched onto you, a thought from someone else or someone who cast a spell on you, or an egregore, an entity, or a little cloud that has stuck to you and keeps hammering at your head, telling you, end your life, end your life, end your life. And if one says, yes, I never had this kind of thinking because that appeared to me just now after I started to, I don't know. That's how it is.
By No, sorry, go ahead.
No, like I passed by a place, I went to a morgue, I went to a hospital, or I smoked something, or drank something, or did a meditation and started having, I mean, it's like everything. If you don't know how to handle it, it can harm you. I don't know. A little bit of alcohol won't do anything to you, but too much alcohol can ruin your life. A little bit of tobacco won't do anything to you, but too much tobacco is the same. And it's like that with everything. So with these therapies, some people might use them as an escape, because I had acquaintances, even friends, who became addicted to certain therapies because they helped them avoid their problems, but they weren't actually solving the problem. I mean, they became addicted to a therapy, let's say one of these good ones, when they're properly applied, but in that way, the excess became another problem. Go ahead. They got out of one problem and ended up in another. That's what I mean. But it's not the therapy itself, it's the lack of skill in handling it, or the lack of knowledge of the person who is going to approach it, who is going to apply it.
Absolutely, German. We're already close to an hour of recording, which is about how long our conversations usually last. So I don't know if you'd like to wrap up with something, any comments, or share a particular situation.
First of all, thank you, Alex, because as you said, it's very important to understand, manage, and overcome trauma to get out of that place. There are many techniques, many ways. I would recommend, in whatever way works for you, that everyone seeks to connect with spirituality. Some do it through religion, others in different ways, but there is something transcendent, beyond us, greater than us, the great spirit, the divine source, unified consciousness, the ether, plasma, chi, whatever you want to call it. But that's where we come from, that's what we live in, we are made of that, we breathe that, and we never leave it. We change the level, the appearance, the operating system with which we function, with a body, without a body, but we never die. We are always conscious energy. So it's about finding ways to become more self-aware, or each time God, with greater peace, managing trauma, bringing affection and love, the adult with the child. We can talk about that another time if you'd like, so that this idea of the inner child, which is sometimes misunderstood, can be more easily understood. And to have the confidence that you can learn. It's a learning process. You can learn to manage it, the trauma, the pain, to create states of calm, to create states of happiness, of enjoyment. I'm not saying you have to be euphoric all the time, but to be joyful, simply in everyday life, calmly, peacefully, and that is something you learn. Peace? Exactly. It is possible. There's no magic here. It's work, learning, and application.
That's how it is. Thank you very much, Germán. There was a lot of material left, 2 stories I wanted to tell you, so please, I would really appreciate it if you could come back to the program soon and have another chat, because the truth is, we left a lot of material and the hour flew by, and I really, really appreciate your presence here. I think today was a program that those who watched it will take away a lot. There are all kinds of programs, entertaining ones, scary ones where we talk about archetypes, and yours, I think, deals with situations from daily life and the management of emotions and trauma, which are invaluable, especially for those who need a little more help handling them. Like you said, we aren't trained for this. Most of us learn on our own, but there are many people who really need these kinds of tools, and I appreciate it because I'm sure these comments will be helpful to them. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone who watches this program has an excellent day. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone for your attention. See you later. Thank you, Germán.
Bye, and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for making it to this part of the video. This is my favorite part. This is where I suggest to you that you discover your true self. You are not what you have been groomed to believe. You are this incredible being without limits that has eternal life, amazing strength, infinite wisdom, and a big, beautiful heart. All your limits are always self-imposed. Your best version in this reality is inside you. Your only mission on this life is to become a beacon of love and to serve others. This version is ready to be discovered today. How do you discover your true self? The discovery process is a personal one. No one can do it for you. Dedicate 5 minutes a day to talk to the universe. Simply ask, who am I? Where do I come from? What is my purpose? You will start getting signs, breadcrumbs, and signals. You will notice how your notions about this reality start disappearing. No more hierarchies, no more competition, no more complaining, no more depending on others. Discovering your true self equals to real freedom. Your self-imposed limits will fall and you will be ready to understand this reality, but you must be patient to allow others to wake up at their time through their own free will. That will be really soon, you will see, and that will set up a new world. As you work towards your best version, you will notice how all emotions don't serve you anymore. Hate, fear, rage, pride, lust, envy, violence, justice through violence, judgment of others, and other emotions will disappear from your mind and heart. You will understand those emotions are only your egoic mind and are not you.
Please try to be understanding of others that don't think or feel like you. Everyone has a process. No one is right or wrong. We're all just different. Don't be concerned about being right, ever. Don't allow pride preventing you from patching things up with family and friends. It's very important you enjoy this life with your loved ones. Put in the work to patch things up and leave it to others to decide. Thank you very much for watching. Please share, like, and subscribe. If you have any comments or suggestions, please use the comment section below. For private questions, conversations, and if you'd like to appear on the show, please email me at hey@thealexshow.tv. Thank you again. Please don't forget to visit our website www.thealexshow.tv. By giving me your time, you honor me. Have a very, very, very